David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. This is Pour Day. This is part 2 and the final part of this series. Part 1 was the demo and setup with a lot of interesting underground things that we ran into and got through. But now it's Pour Day, and this is Associated Ready Mix out of Gardena, California. And this job happens to be in Huntington Beach, California. The concrete truck is a new one, and it runs on natural gas. It's an interesting setup. It doesn't have much power from what I understand going up the big hills, or it does have the power to get you up, but at a very slow pace. Kind of like a turtle, you know, it just keeps going, you know, even though it's not getting far or fast, but it gets you there. Now here's this, we're just priming the pump. This is the water that comes through the hose first. That lubes the hose up so the concrete flows through it without clogging. I like to put it in a wheelbarrow and dispose of the water. As what happens if you leave the water in the wheelbarrow for a few hours, all the heavy sediment settles to the bottom and you have clear drinkable water on top. So it's just a matter of separation, and then that water's still good. So that's how I do it. I reuse it. We have a 10-foot metal aluminum screed, and that's what we're running. And I notice the screed pins are set at about 12 feet. That way you can pull the wetty off the planter and then wet screed off of that, turn and burn, so to speak. Here we are up in the new ramp down entry. This did have a step in it, but we got rid of that, and we're just going to ramp it down to the garage floor elevation. I've got foam wrapped around on those water lines. Those are copper pipes. What that is it goes to a water softener in the garage, and then it returns back. So you got one going in and one out back into the house, so right over here on the left. Also, that's your water supply line to your sprinkler system that goes under the driveway. So you got a couple things going on there in that little box out. This particular concrete mix design is a good one, and you know, and it varies too a lot of times. I mean, sometimes you don't always get what you expect, and in this case it was a good load. And what it is it's a 3,000 psi, and it came at a good slump, about a 5-inch, which is just perfect for this. And then also I've got Buckeye fiber mesh in there. It's a microfiber. And what I do is about, I think we did a ½ pound per yard. It's not real heavy fiber, but it's enough to help you out a little bit. And by what I mean by help you out is, because I'm going to be going in here with an early entry concrete saw, doing a decorative saw cut pattern. And what you don't want on saw cuts when you're going in early is a lot of spalling on your cuts. And that's what that fiber does. It holds the surface together when that blade's hitting it. It also does a couple other things as well. It's great for shrinkage cracks, especially in a hot climate where it's drying fast. You'll want some fiber. The steel is your structural component of the concrete pour. That holds it together from major movement. Here's your wood bowl float. You got to get up in there early, because if you don't, you can't really get back over there, because we're working on our way out, and it's hard to get back up here because it's all wet concrete you'd have to travel through to get here again. So you gotta lay it down good first time out. This is my son Tyler on the bowl float right here. I also have Timmy. It's kind of like a family reunion right here on this job. I got both sons helping me out on this particular pour. I've got one guy manning the rebar puller. He's pulling that rebar up as we go out. Because I have them on 2-foot centers, you don't really have to step on them and drive the bars down to the dirt. It's easy to avoid them once you figure it out, that they're 2 foot, and you start working your steps. It becomes kind of natural to miss them. This is a 6 foot wide Fresno with a rocker arm on it. And you can see how nice this concrete mix looks right now. We're doing a 1 foot band all the way around the perimeter, and then what we'll do is we'll saw cut the field into 5 foot squares turned on a 45-degree angle to the house. This is what they call the Arizona joiner, and then if you're using the California joiner, it's a lot more narrow. Same depth, but just narrow. Now this is about an 8 foot cutter. What that does for you is it gets it nice and straight without using straight edges. Then you can let that set a bit and then follow it up with your regular joiner. If you get on it a little too early after your long cutter, then you can move the joint around and then you're crooked again. So you wait a little bit after that long cutter so it stiffens up, then you pass this one through and it'll just stay right in the groove. Here's a 20 by 5 hand trowel. The leading edge is round and the other is square. It's nice to have a trowel that has both edges, especially square in the back and round in the front, so you don't leave a line in the front. And then your square point, if you run into a corner, you can still fit in it if you just spin your trowel around. So that's why you kind of want the dual purpose trowel there. Final pass on your joint is going to be by hand. And you can see that that joiner that he was using there said Roseboro on it, Roseboro Tools on it, out of Orange. They've been there for a long time. They're out of business. From what I understand, they closed the doors, but I mean, I haven't checked into it personally, but that's what I'm hearing. Here's my horsehair concrete broom, and I'm using a different type of pole. I'm using a painter's pole. Instead of typical aluminum 6 foot lengths, pop them together. This particular painter pole extends to about 16 feet. And it retracts to about 8 feet. So initially I went out there on the big sliders and broomed the furthest away, and then as I came back I pulled my sliders off, and you notice that I was able to broom my slider marks right out of the concrete because it's that hard already. Didn't make any indentation in the concrete. In other words, if it was too early on your sliders and you sunk in at all, you wouldn't be able to broom that out. You'd have to go out of hand trowels again. So you got to be careful with that. But But here's the next day. This concrete went off fast because I did have, I forgot to mention, I had 1% accelerator in this concrete as well, and no fly ash, so it went off. We had it poured out. We had 20 yards go in here. We had it poured out and broomed 3 hours. And the reason I did that with the accelerator, we're right on the beach here. I mean, we're within a mile of the beach, and you always get this marine layer, so that was one issue we had. And then I wanted to be able to saw cut this the very next day without leaving any spalling on the cuts. So it worked out perfectly according to plan. Got all of our lines snapped in, and I started with the center. I centered all these cuts off the center of garage doors. You can see that center line, which we're not going to cut on. That's where everything worked off of in the beginning. This is the skill saw. It's a Medusa designed for cutting concrete. It has a wet, you could cut wet with it or dry. It has both attachments. I'm using the DeWalt cordless vacuum. And I've adapted another hose on it so I don't have to move the vacuum around as often. We're cutting about 3/4 of an inch deep every 5 foot. We're stopping at the inside of the band, and then at that point we're going to continue the cut through, but square to the band. Rather than continue the 45-degree angle through the band, we'll turn that joint at the band square with the outside perimeter. So now I've marked the bands. I just used my little framing square, squared it off of that 2x4 there, and brought them across, adjoining the 45-degree grid. And I don't cut every one. We're having a little rain right now as I'm cutting this. That's why everything's wet. We have the vacuum, so a dust control is optimal right now. Now that we've got it all cut, just a matter of cleaning it up, because we do have a little residual concrete dust on here. And that concrete dust, if you blow it, if you wash it, anywhere it goes, where it settles, it kind of rehardens and it'll kind of stick to stuff or stain, almost staining wherever you leave it laying. So what we have at the street, we created a dam at the bottom of the street, and then we have a wet vac, a 12-gallon wet vac at the bottom, sucking everything out as it hits the street. But here's your finished product. It turned out really beautiful here, and I'm going to show you some really close-up views of these saw cuts and how straight it is, just you know, freehanding it basically. We'll take a look at the longest cut first. Now if you can get the longest cut straight, then you know these short ones are going to be good. So here's your longest cut right here. It came out real nice. We rebuilt these brick planters. You could see in part one the damage that happened to these brick planters during the removal process. But it looks like they've been there for 60 years still, because we reused the original brick that we salvaged from the front porch removal and rebuilt where we needed to. Anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.